For years, Officer Brett Carlin operated unchecked, brutal, arrogant, and shielded by a system that looked the other way. When he pulled over Nia Monroe on a quiet highway, he saw only a lone black woman, unarmed and outnumbered, easy to intimidate, easy to silence. But the officer didn't know who she was. Nia Monroe wasn't just a civilian. She was a former CIA operative. She'd traded the field for peace, but when Carlin escalated to violence, she didn't back down. She fought back, and it shattered everything he thought he controlled. Now, the system that protected him is cracking, and Nia's just getting started. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe. The sun had just sunk beneath the edge of the pines, casting the world in a soft wash of violet and orange, the kind of dusky light that made the road shimmer like polished obsidian. Nia Monroe drove with one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel, her posture relaxed, her eyes steady behind dark lashes. The hum of tires on asphalt filled the cabin of the silver sedan, a comforting rhythm that let her drift in thought. She wasn't in a hurry. There was no meeting to catch, no operative to brief, no shadows trailing her from foreign rooftops. Just the road, the trees, and the sigh of an evening settling in. It had been nearly 2 years since she'd turned in her CIA credentials, a quiet farewell wrapped in silence and a handshake that meant more than any ceremony. Since then, she'd traded classified files and covert missions for the mundane rhythms of civilian life, consulting when she had to, disappearing when she didn't. Her life now was unremarkable by design. But Nia had learned a long time ago that danger didn't always need to hide in back alleys or encrypted files. Sometimes it came in broad daylight. Sometimes it wore a badge. She slowed as she saw the flashing red and blue lights ahead. A single cruiser parked diagonally across a 2-lane country highway. Cones set out like breadcrumbs leading up to a routine check stop. The officer stood near the front of the car, illuminated by his own floodlight, a clipboard in one hand, his other resting on his hip. Nothing unusual. At least, not at first glance. Nia exhaled softly and eased her car to a stop behind the line of orange cones. Her fingers checked her glove compartment instinctively, locating her license and registration. She placed both on the dashboard where they were easy to see. Old habits always minimize risk. The officer approached with a practiced stride, deliberate but casual. Mid-40s, stocky build, close-cropped blonde hair, and a clean-shaven face that seemed almost too neat for the lines carved into it. He wore sunglasses even though the sun had already bowed out, and his smile didn't quite touch the corners of his mouth. "Evening, ma'am," he said, voice drawling just enough to sound familiar without feeling friendly. "You headed somewhere tonight?" "Home," Nia replied smoothly. "Just finished a day trip." "Nothing major." He nodded and glanced into the car, scanning the passenger seat, the floorboard, then back to her face. "Mind if I take a look inside?" Her brows lifted slightly. "Is there a reason for the search?" He flashed the smile again, this time with teeth. "Just routine. You'd be surprised what we find out here." "I'd be more surprised if you found probable cause," she said calmly, her voice free of heat, her tone even. The smile didn't fade, but something behind his eyes did. He tapped the roof of her car once with his clipboard and said, "Step out of the vehicle, please." Nia didn't move immediately. Her body didn't tense. Her face didn't betray a single thought. But inside, the alertness bloomed like a reflex. This wasn't protocol. And he wasn't just doing his job. There was something else, something performative in the way he moved. The way he looked at her, like he wanted her to challenge him, like he was waiting for it. "Am I being detained?" she asked, her hands still visible. "Step out of the car," he repeated, his voice lower now, losing the edge of politeness it never really wore well to begin with. "Or, I'll help you out." There was a pause, long enough to stretch the air between them tight. Nia gave a nod, slow and fluid, and unbuckled her seatbelt. She opened the door and stepped out, letting her hands rest lightly at her sides. She could feel the gravel crunch beneath her boots, the night air cooling against her face. She was taller than him by an inch. He didn't like that. He circled the car like a predator who'd already claimed the kill, peering through the windows, opening the passenger door without asking. He began rifling through her glove box, then moved to her tote bag on the floor. She watched as he unzipped it, fingers sliding over her things. Journal, water bottle, a small pouch of toiletries. Nia stepped forward. "There's nothing illegal in there," she said quietly. He didn't answer. He held up her lip balm, looked at it, then tossed it back like it offended him. "Lots of folks try to hide things in plain sight," he muttered. "And you always search without cause?" Her tone was still neutral, but firmer now. He turned then, fully facing her. "You got a problem, ma'am?" She met his eyes, steady and unblinking. "I have rights. That's not a problem. That's a fact." For a flicker of a second, she saw the smirk falter. He didn't expect that. Not from a woman like her. Not here. And as the light from the cruiser pulsed red-blue-red against the evening sky, Nia felt it. The subtle shift in air. The moment the game changed. She didn't know it yet, but the first domino had already fallen. The wind stirred gently through the trees along the shoulder of the highway, brushing dried leaves across the road like whispers too quiet to hear. Nia Monroe stood by the open driver's side door of her car, the cool evening air licking against her skin. Her movements remained calm, her breath steady, but beneath that composed surface, she was cataloging every shift in tone, every inch of body language from the man across from her. Officer Brett Carlin stepped closer, the gravel crunching under his boots. He stopped just short of her window, posture stiff, one hand resting near his utility belt. Not drawn, not aggressive, but settled in that practiced way some officers used when they wanted you to know who had the power in the moment. "License and registration," Carlin repeated, the clipped formality in his voice sharpening now, like the civility had been worn thin from use. Nia gave him a small nod and leaned back into the car. Her reach toward the glove compartment was smooth and measured, every part of her body language designed to de-escalate, not out of fear, but experience. She retrieved the documents and placed them on her palm, offering them to him wordlessly. Carlin took them without a thank you. His eyes scanned her license, flipping it back and forth like he was hoping it would reveal something incriminating. "You from around here?" he asked, head still bent over the ID, but his gaze flickering up at her in intervals. Nia answered evenly. "Visiting family. About an hour north. Got a name for them?" He followed up, the tone deceptively conversational. There was a brief pause, not from hesitation, but choice. She studied his face now. Deliberate, assessing. "Excuse me?" she asked, the faintest edge threading into her voice. "Your folks. Who you stayin' with?" Carlin replied, a hint of something performative in his delivery, something he wanted to look casual, but didn't land that way. "I wasn't aware that was required information for a routine check stop," Nia said plainly. "Not required," he replied, forcing a smile. "Just friendly conversation." She didn't return the smile. "I've provided my documents. I'd prefer to keep things straightforward." Carlin tilted his head slightly, like a dog that just heard an unfamiliar sound. The smile didn't leave his lips, but it no longer masked the disdain behind his eyes. "You seem awful cautious for someone who's got nothing to hide," he said. "And you seem awful persistent for someone who hasn't cited a single reason for stopping me," Nia replied, her voice still calm, but the words more pointed now. A long silence stretched between them. The sound of wind pressing through pine branches became the only noise between two people staring across an invisible battlefield. Then his hand shifted to rest on his belt, thumb looping behind the holster. "Step out of the vehicle," he said flatly. Her brows furrowed, just enough to show that she'd registered the command and the imbalance behind it. "You've already inspected the exterior. There's no probable cause to—" "I said out," Carlin snapped, this time with an undercurrent of finality that tasted like a challenge. Nia didn't blink. She exhaled slowly and stepped out, shutting the door gently behind her. Her boots pressed into the shoulder of the road, the silence between each footstep marked by the subtle tension of someone who knew the weight of an escalation coming before it even began. She stood upright, hands relaxed by her sides. "You mind explaining the cause for search?" she asked, her tone level. Carlin didn't answer. Instead, he moved past her, tugging open the passenger door without permission. The sound of the handle clicking echoed in the quiet dusk. He ducked down and leaned into the cabin, his flashlight beam sweeping across the front seat like he was looking for ghosts. "That's personal property," Nia said from behind him. "You sittin' on contraband, Miss Monroe?" he asked, not even turning around. "No," she replied firmly. "Then I guess there's no harm in me taking a peek," he said casually, though there was nothing casual about the way he started pulling items out of her bag. He lifted her tablet, held it up as if its clean black casing might reveal state secrets. "Looks fancy," he muttered, not asking, just assuming. "It's work," she answered plainly. "Workin' late?" he asked with a glance at her. She said nothing this time. There was nothing else to say that wouldn't feed into his game. He set the tablet aside and reached deeper, unzipping a pouch that held her toiletries. She could hear the rattle of items moving. Lip balm, travel-size hand lotion, a folded cloth napkin from a roadside cafe. He pulled the items apart like he was hunting for something illegal he could pretend to find. "Lots of folks try to hide things in plain sight," he mumbled, holding up her lip balm, then tossing it back into the pouch like it disgusted him. Then he reached for her wallet. He opened it without hesitation, flipping through cards, IDs, a few worn business slips, and finally, a folded photo. It was a soft image, her uncle with her niece on his shoulders, taken years ago in a park with sun pouring through the trees. Carlin stared at it a second too long, then dropped it back without a word. "Why are you doing this?" Nia asked quietly. Carlin turned to face her, brushing dust off his uniform like he'd just completed something important. "I don't like attitudes," he said, voice low. "I especially don't like it when someone gets twitchy about a simple search." "Is that what this is to you?" she asked. "Simple? You tell me," he said, stepping closer. She didn't step back. She didn't flinch. "You've crossed a line," she said calmly, the weight behind her words cutting sharper than volume ever could. Carlin's face hardened. "The only line I see is the one you're tiptoeing across. Think you're smarter than me?" "I think I know the law," she replied. He chuckled, just a short, bitter sound. "And I think you need to learn when to keep your mouth shut," he said. The finality in his tone wasn't just about her words. It was about her existence, her defiance, her refusal to be small. Behind them, the cruiser's lights continued to flash, washing the trees in blood-red pulses and flickers of blue. The woods were quiet, like they were holding their breath. Carlin turned and started walking away, muttering under his breath, "Stay right there." And she did, but in her mind, she was already preparing, because something had shifted in the air. And once a line like that was crossed, you didn't go back. Nia remained still, her feet planted beside her car, eyes tracking Officer Carlin's every movement. He was no longer pretending to maintain professionalism, no checklist in hand, no more glances at her license. Now he stood with his arms crossed over his chest, a posture meant to signal authority. But to her, it looked like a man puffed up with his own power and the security of a badge. He lingered there beside the cruiser, lit in flashes of red and blue, staring at her like a puzzle that refused to cooperate. She wasn't going to back down, but she also wasn't trying to ignite the situation any further. That part of her training had never left, learning when to speak, how to measure tone, how to de-escalate when things teetered toward violence. She could feel that tension now, creeping into her bones, coiling beneath the surface like a drawn wire. "Officer," she said evenly, keeping her voice measured and grounded, "you've searched the vehicle. You've seen my identification. I've complied with every request." Carlin didn't respond at first. He stood still for a beat too long, and then, with a low grunt of annoyance, He turned and began walking back toward her, not quickly, not aggressively, but with that deliberate pace that men like him used to let you know they believed they owned the ground between you. She didn't move. She watched him approach, her arms still relaxed at her sides, her posture open but firm. If there was a way to end this without blood, she intended to find it. "This is unnecessary," she continued, her voice calm and almost too quiet for the tension in the air. "Let's de-escalate this now. There's no reason for this to continue." Carlin stopped a few feet in front of her, folding his arms again, his eyes narrowing with something that felt far more dangerous than suspicion. It was something personal now, something rooted in the fact that she hadn't been afraid. "You're awfully smooth for someone who's hiding something," he said, his voice low, almost mocking. "I'm not hiding anything," she replied, "and I think you know that." He tilted his head slightly, studying her like he still couldn't decide what she was, a threat, a challenge, or just an irritation he hadn't shaken off yet. "No," he said slowly, "I don't know anything about you. That's what bothers me." Nia's jaw tightened, just a fraction, but her voice remained steady. "You're angry because I didn't let you intimidate me. That's what this is." "But I've done nothing wrong," Carlin chuckled, sharp and humorless, stepping closer with a smirk that barely masked the contempt underneath. "You think I'm angry?" he asked, lowering his voice to a growl. "Lady, I'm just getting started." Nia didn't blink. She remained grounded, centered, her breath steady even as the storm continued to build in his posture, in the way his fingers twitched near his belt, in the way his smile had become a sneer. "I'm asking you to stop," she said, her voice quiet but not pleading. "I'm warning you." But warnings meant nothing to men like Carlin. He didn't stop. He leaned in even closer, his face now just inches from hers, his breath hot with the scent of cigarettes and ego. His presence was oppressive, a show of force disguised as proximity. "You want to lecture me about protocol?" he sneered, the words curling like smoke. "Out here, I decide how things go." "You're abusing your position," she said simply, the truth resting in her tone like a stone that couldn't be moved. Carlin's smirk deepened, and his eyes glittered with something darker. "And you're about 10 seconds from regretting this little attitude." Still, she didn't retreat. She held his gaze, unmoved by the threat, rooted in something far deeper than defiance. She was a woman who had seen what real violence looked like, who had walked through fire and come out breathing. This man in front of her was dangerous, yes, but he was not unfamiliar. "This isn't who you want to be," she said softly, but there was weight in the words, not weakness. But it didn't matter. He didn't hear her, or maybe he didn't care. "You think you scare me," Carlin hissed, leaning even closer, his tone rising now. "I'm not trying to," she said, and then it happened. The punch came without warning. A sudden, wild burst of anger that twisted his arm through the air like a hammer. It wasn't a warning shot, not a shove meant to intimidate. It was a closed fist strike thrown with full intention, and it landed square against the left side of Nia's face. The world jerked sideways. Her vision exploded in white, sharp pain radiating from her cheekbone to her temple. Her head snapped back from the force, and her knees bent instinctively, absorbing the impact before she staggered backward, one hand reaching for the edge of the hood to steady herself. She didn't fall, but the pain lit a fuse. A hot taste of blood bloomed on her tongue. Her fingers touched the corner of her lip and came away red. Carlin stood over her now, fists clenched, breathing hard, his face flushed with a sick kind of satisfaction. "You want respect?" he snarled. "You earn it." Nia's eyes met his, steady, burning. The left side of her face pulsed with each heartbeat, but she stood tall again, straightening with quiet resolve. Her hand dropped to her side. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She simply stated the truth. "You just assaulted me," he scoffed. "Yeah? And who's gonna believe you?" That was when the shift happened. Not just in the conversation, but in the air, in her stance, in her mind. The switch flipped. She wasn't trying to de-escalate anymore. She wasn't backing down. Her voice dropped an octave, smooth and final. "I warned you," Carlin laughed again, louder this time. "You don't get to warn me. You don't get to do anything." His hand drifted to the taser at his hip. The motion wasn't slow. It wasn't for show. He was ready to use it, but she was already moving. She stepped into him, faster than he expected, faster than he could register. Her hand caught his wrist just as he unlatched the taser, and with a sharp twist, she redirected the momentum up and away from her body. At the same moment, her elbow drove hard into the center of his chest, targeting the sternum. His breath escaped in a violent wheeze, and he staggered backward 2 steps. Before he could regain balance, she turned his own weight against him, grabbing the edge of his vest and spinning him off his axis. His boots skidded across the gravel, and his body slammed into the rear bumper of her car with a loud metallic thud. "What the?" he tried to say. Breathless and disoriented, but she wasn't finished. Not yet. The fight had only just begun. The sharp clang of metal echoed into the trees as Carlin's body struck the rear bumper of Nia's car. He let out a harsh grunt, the air driven from his lungs, but he recovered faster than she expected. Years of adrenaline and street brawling had hardened him, even if his techniques were crude. He pushed off the car, boots scraping across the gravel, fury tightening every muscle in his face. "You're gonna regret that," he growled, spitting into the dirt. "I already do," Nia muttered, shifting her stance just enough to square her weight. Feet planted shoulder-width apart, her center low and balanced. Carlin charged. His bulk came at her fast, with more force than finesse. He swung wide, a heavy, looping punch aimed to crush her left side. Nia ducked under it, her body moving from instinct, not thought. Her elbow shot upward, catching the inside of his arm to break momentum. Then her right palm cracked into his jawline. It was a clean strike, precise, designed to disorient, not cripple. But Carlin barely flinched. He absorbed the hit and twisted back, shoulder first, ramming into her with his full weight. The impact knocked the breath from her chest. She stumbled backward and felt her shoulder clip the open driver's side door behind her. Carlin didn't wait. He came in again, this time quicker, more deliberate. His knee came up and struck her in the thigh. Hard. Pain radiated down her leg like a tremor, but she gritted her teeth and absorbed it. She caught his second punch with a forearm block, but the third one, a short, brutal jab, slipped through and landed square against her ribs. The breath hitched in her throat. He was stronger than she anticipated, fueled not just by size, but by anger. Years of unchecked aggression now unleashed. But strength alone wasn't enough, not against someone trained to survive chaos. She twisted to the side and slid around him, using his own forward momentum to redirect him toward the front of the car. As he stumbled past her, she struck again. 2 quick jabs to the kidneys, followed by a snap kick to the back of his thigh. His leg buckled for a moment, but not enough to take him down. He whipped around and swung wildly, catching her across the temple with the back of his hand. Her vision blurred for a second, her head snapping to the side, and the metallic taste in her mouth thickened. She staggered, regaining her footing just as he charged again. This time, he didn't go for punches. He tackled, his arms wrapped around her midsection, lifting her just enough off the ground to slam her hard against the hood of her own car. The impact rang through her spine like a bell, and for a second her hands flailed, trying to find leverage. Her elbow came down into his back, once, then again. On the third strike, she angled her hip just right and twisted. Hard. He lost his grip. She slid off the hood and landed awkwardly on her feet, her knees jolting from the uneven ground. He turned and grabbed her again, one hand fisting the collar of her jacket, the other cocked back to strike. But before the punch landed, she surged forward, grabbing his wrist and locking his arm against her shoulder. She stepped into him, turned her hips, and flipped him, hard, onto the gravel. He hit with a wet thud, a grunt ripping from his throat as his back struck earth and stone. Nia stepped back, panting, sweat slick across her brow now. Her ribs ached. Her jaw pulsed from the earlier punch. Her right thigh throbbed. She didn't feel powerful. She felt like she was holding back a hurricane, trying not to let it consume her. Carlin rolled to his side, spitting dirt from his mouth, then pushed himself to his feet with a low snarl. Blood trickled from his nose, dark in the flashing light. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You're done." He lunged again. This time, Nia was ready, but so was he. They collided in the middle of the gravel road, fists clashing, limbs tangling. His punch grazed her shoulder, spinning her off balance. She retaliated with a hard jab to his neck, but he caught her arm mid-swing and yanked her forward, slamming his forehead into her face. Her nose exploded with pain, and she stumbled backward, stars blinking into her vision. Blood streamed down her lip now, warm and thick. Carlin came in for the kill, but pain sharpened her focus. It didn't weaken her. It anchored her. She waited for the next strike, and when his fist came at her in a telegraphed arc, she ducked low, stepped to the side, and drove her knee into his stomach. As he folded, she grabbed his vest and twisted, driving him backward onto the hood. His head cracked against the metal, and for a moment, his body sagged. She didn't finish him. She stepped back, chest heaving, blood dripping from her mouth. Nia stared at him as he slowly slid down the hood and landed on the ground, groaning. She could have ended it. One more strike, one precise move. But she didn't, because unlike him, she still believed in restraint. Carlin coughed, hands splayed across the gravel, struggling to push himself up again. And as the red and blue lights continued to flash around them, painting the scene in broken pulses of chaos, Nia backed away. The fight wasn't over, but this round, this storm of fists and fury, was behind them, and something worse was coming. The road was deathly quiet now, save for the faint crackle of a nearby radio in Carlin's cruiser, and the soft moan of wind curling through the trees. Gravel crunched beneath Nia's boots as she took one slow step back, blood from her nose and lip mingling with sweat on her chin. Her limbs ached, her ribs burned, her jaw throbbed with each heartbeat. But her eyes, they stayed locked on Carlin, who crouched beside the car, head low, chest heaving, fists still balled like a man too stubborn to know when he'd been beaten. He tried to push himself upright, one hand gripping the bumper, the other pressing against his side. His lips curled into something ugly, something bitter. "You," he started, but the words faltered in his throat. He wasn't done, but his body was. Nia knew this wasn't over. Not really. She stepped toward the open driver's door, her hand moving on instinct. She didn't want to turn her back to him, not fully, but she couldn't stay here. She couldn't afford to let this drag out any longer. Every second on this roadside was a second she risked being painted the villain in a story she didn't start. He coughed and spat blood onto the gravel. "You're dead," he hissed. "You just don't know it yet." Nia's fingers gripped the handle of her door, knuckles white. Her voice came out low, quiet, but deadly clear. "You should have walked away." She got in. She slammed the door shut, engine still idling from before. Her fingers trembled slightly on the wheel, a residue of adrenaline still flowing wild through her system. The blood on her shirt was fresh, already drying. Her jacket was torn at the sleeve. Her cheek had swollen, and the pain behind her left eye pulsed with dull, persistent heat. But she was breathing, and she was thinking, always thinking. She reversed off the gravel shoulder in one fluid motion, spun the wheel, and pointed the car down the darkened road. Her foot pressed gently on the accelerator, not flooring it, not fleeing in a frenzy. She didn't need to draw more attention. She needed distance, just enough to put a buffer between herself and the storm she knew would come behind her. The trees closed in again as the road straightened, stretching into shadows broken only by her headlights. For a long moment, The only sound was the engine and the soft hum of tires gliding over asphalt. Her hands tightened on the wheel. She knew how this looked. She knew exactly what was waiting around the next bend. Not a roadblock or a helicopter or sirens, but something quieter and far more dangerous, a narrative, a headline already forming in the minds of people who hadn't been there. A black woman assaults an officer. A suspect flees the scene. She could hear it already. Hear the excuses, the justifications, the voices layered in rehearsed indignation. But she wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was heading to the station. Not because she trusted the system, not because she believed Carlin would play fair, but because she had learned a long time ago that control wasn't always won in the fight. It was won in what came after. She couldn't vanish. Not this time. She had to shape the story before it was shaped for her. Her left hand slipped off the wheel just long enough to grab her phone from the passenger seat. She thumbed through her contacts with practiced speed, the names blurred by the faint tremor in her fingers. She found him. Reese Calloway, her old handler, her lifeline. She hit call and brought the phone to her ear. The line rang once, twice. Her breath caught, her shoulder tightening. 3 rings, then 4. Voicemail. His voice came on, calm, smooth, the same tone he used in every debrief. You've reached Calloway. If this line is active, I'll be in touch. If it's urgent, you know what to do. The beep followed. She closed her eyes briefly and exhaled into the silence. This is Naya, she said, her voice low, raw. I need a sweep. Local jurisdiction. Officer named Brett Carlin. He put hands on me. I defended myself. I'm on my way to the station now. This could spiral. Fast. She paused, then added, Please don't let them bury this. She ended the call. The phone dropped back to the seat beside her as she kept her eyes on the road ahead. The highway was nearly empty now, just long stretches of darkness broken by the occasional glint of metal reflecting in the trees. She knew where the station was. She'd passed it earlier that morning. Quiet, small, the kind of place with 4 holding cells and 1 working coffee machine. She wasn't going to walk in empty-handed, but she wasn't going to walk in guns blazing either. She was going to walk in as herself, bloodied, bruised, and unbowed. And somewhere behind her, she knew Carlin wouldn't stay down for long. She could feel it. He wasn't the kind of man to swallow a loss, not even one as clear-cut as what had just unfolded. She checked her rearview mirror. Nothing yet, but she knew better than to assume silence meant safety. The real war hadn't started. It was just circling, waiting to strike. The road ahead stretched into an endless ribbon of black, flanked by thick walls of pine and the occasional flicker of roadside reflectors. Nia kept her eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel, her body aching in too many places to count. The aftershock of the fight hadn't settled. Her jaw still pulsed with pain, her ribs protested every breath. But her mind was locked in, razor sharp, focused on the only thing that mattered now, getting to the station before this got any worse. But worse had a way of finding you. A sudden glare erupted in her rearview mirror. Headlights, bright, wild, and far too close. She knew instantly who it was. Carlin. He hadn't stayed down, hadn't called it in, hadn't taken the loss. No, men like him didn't believe in losing, especially not to someone who didn't flinch. The cruiser's engine roared as it accelerated behind her, closing the distance with a predator's hunger. She tightened her grip on the wheel, eyes darting between the road and the mirror. There was no siren, no flashing lights, just him, coming, hard. She pressed the accelerator, coaxing her sedan to move faster, though it groaned in protest. It wasn't built for this. The tires skidded slightly as the road curved, but she handled the turn with precision, keeping to the shoulder just enough to give herself space, to keep her options open. Then came the first hit. Not enough to send her off the road, but enough to rattle the frame and jolt her teeth. The cruiser bumped her rear bumper, the sound of steel on steel shrieking through the quiet night. She gritted her teeth and kept steady, fighting the instinct to slam the brakes or veer. Another hit. This one harder. The back of her car jolted again, tires screaming against the pavement as she wrestled with the wheel. Her car fish-tailed briefly before regaining traction. Gravel sprayed from the shoulder as she swerved left to create space. He was pushing her, not trying to stop her, trying to punish her. She reached for her phone again, fumbling slightly with one hand as she drove. It lit up with the missed call screen, the voicemail indicator blinking back at her. No call back yet. No help coming. Another slam, this time into her side. The cruiser had surged forward, bumping the rear quarter panel and sending her car skidding toward the embankment. She fought to control it, turning into the skid, easing her weight to counterbalance. She recovered, barely. The trees rushed by in a blur as the road narrowed into a single-lane bridge. Up ahead, a small rise led into an open stretch. But the shoulder was gone. Just concrete rails and black water beyond. She couldn't afford a hit there. She downshifted, heart pounding now, the wheel vibrating under her grip. Her tires caught the incline, and she sped up, engine whining as the sedan lurched forward. Behind her, Carlin followed like a shadow, relentless, seething. Another bump. This time, she didn't wait. Nia tapped her brakes, just for a split second, just enough to throw off his timing. The cruiser surged too fast, overshooting her slightly. She jerked the wheel and swerved to the right, narrowly missing the railing as her tires bit into the edge of the pavement. Sparks flew as her front bumper grazed the side, but she was still moving. The bridge ended, opening back into a stretch of forest-lined road. She didn't slow down. Her mind raced alongside the engine, calculating every turn, every possible escape, every route burned into memory from training that never truly left her. She needed somewhere with visibility, somewhere to level the playing field, because if he kept ramming her, if she lost control again, this wouldn't end in arrest. It would end in wreckage. Behind her, the cruiser fell back a few car lengths, then surged again. The rhythm was becoming clear now. He was trying to line up a perfect hit. Her fingers brushed against the central console where a small tactical flashlight rested. She grabbed it quickly and tossed it into the passenger seat. If he forced her off the road, she wouldn't go down unprepared. Another swerve. He was testing her now, feinting left, then right, then closing in again. Nia took a sharp right turn down a side road, tires shrieking, dust kicking up behind her in a plume. The cruiser followed seconds later, its lights disappearing momentarily into the cloud of gravel and dirt before roaring back into view. This road was narrower, less maintained. Patches of uneven asphalt and old potholes made speed dangerous, but she had no choice. She leaned forward, every muscle tense, scanning the bends ahead. A sudden jolt rocked the back of the car again, this time harder, more deliberate. She was losing ground, and Carlin wasn't holding back anymore. The tires howled beneath her as Nia took another bend too fast, the suspension groaning under the strain. Her hands moved fluidly over the wheel, guiding the sedan with practiced precision through the narrowing forest road. Tree limbs reached overhead like claws, their shadows slicing across the windshield in frantic patterns. Gravel spat behind her tires, and the whine of the engine grew shriller as she pushed the car to its limit. In the rearview mirror, the cruiser remained, a beast on her tail, relentless and seething, swallowing distance with every second. The headlights were steady now, unwavering, no longer probing or feinting. Carlin had locked in. He'd made up his mind. This wasn't a pursuit anymore. It was a hunt. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breath. Every bruise from the earlier fight now screamed in protest with each jerk of the wheel. Her left arm throbbed from the blunt force of the tackle against the hood. Her jaw ached. Her ribs stabbed with every inhale. But she kept going. Because stopping now wasn't surrender. It was suicide. She passed an old, rusted mailbox, barely visible in the dark, and then a crumbling fence overtaken by vines. There were no houses here, no lights, no cameras, just a forgotten stretch of road running through a pocket of nowhere. Her foot stayed heavy on the gas, but her eyes scanned ahead for anything. A turnoff, a field, a hill, any change in terrain she could use. But the road was straight now, and empty. Behind her, Carlin closed in again. The cruiser surged forward and rammed the back of her car with a deafening crunch of steel against steel. The jolt rocked her forward, her head snapping slightly as she fought to hold the wheel steady. Her rearview mirror tilted down from the impact, showing nothing but vibrating shadows. The second hit came harder. This time, it sent the back tires skidding sideways, pulling the car into a wild swerve. Her fingers clutched the wheel with both hands, and she yanked it into the slide, correcting the drift just in time to avoid a spin-out. Dust erupted from the shoulder as the sedan skidded close to the edge of the road. Another bump. No hesitation now. He was trying to finish it. Her heart pounded. "Come on," she whispered, urging the car forward, eyes locked ahead. The road was narrowing again, trees creeping in tight, brush and branches reaching across the shoulder. There would be nowhere to maneuver soon. And he knew it. The cruiser accelerated again, coming up alongside her. She could see him now, through the window, through the blur. Carlin's face was a twisted mask of rage, eyes wild, lips pulled into a vicious snarl. He gripped the wheel like he wanted to crush it. And in that moment, Nia knew. This wasn't about bringing her in. He wasn't trying to stop her. He was trying to destroy her. He veered. The cruiser slammed into her side, hard enough to knock her car toward the ditch. The left wheels dropped onto the shoulder, and for a moment the car bounced violently, jolting her body as the chassis scraped against uneven dirt and rock. She fought the pull, twisted the wheel, and floored the gas, managing to lurch back onto the pavement. But her speed was gone. The car had lost momentum, and Carlin was done playing. He fell back slightly, then surged forward and rammed the rear of her car one final time. The sound was brutal. The metal folded. Her back tires lifted. The world spun sideways. She felt the weight of the vehicle shift underneath her, gravity tipping, traction disappearing. The car skidded, then careened off the road completely, crashing through underbrush and snapping through a line of thin trees before slamming into an embankment. The airbags detonated with a muffled explosion, the impact throwing her body forward, then back. Her head hit the headrest. Her knee struck the console. Glass shattered, then silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that screams with the echo of what just happened. Nia blinked against the haze of dust and airbag residue, her vision swimming with stars. Blood trickled from her temple, warm and wet. Her right wrist throbbed. Her leg was pinned awkwardly between the seat and the crushed doorframe. Every part of her body pulsed with pain, but she was alive. Somehow, through the crash and the impact, through the suffocating cloud of smoke and the deafening silence that followed, it hadn't taken her. Pain throbbed in every limb, her body aching, breath shallow, but she was still breathing. Then came the sound, footsteps, steady and deliberate, crunching over gravel and broken glass, slow, measured, purposeful, each step drawing closer, with the weight of intent behind it. She blinked through the haze, her fingers reaching instinctively for the door handle, but it refused to budge. The frame was warped from the crash. Panic surged. Her other hand fumbled for the seatbelt release, nerves jolting as she tried to focus, to move faster. Too late. The driver's side door was suddenly ripped open with brute force, the metal groaning under the strain. Cold air rushed in, and so did the shadow of the man she'd hoped not to see again. Carlin stood over her, face streaked with sweat, his uniform stained with dirt and blood. His lip was split, his nose crooked, but none of that dimmed the madness in his eyes. "You think you're gonna run?" he growled, grabbing the front of her jacket and yanking her out of the seat. She hit the ground hard, shoulder first, pain lancing through her arm. Before she could rise, his knee drove into her side, pinning her down. His hand went to his belt. "No more games," he hissed. The taser clicked. She tried to roll, but her body was slow, groggy. The pain was overwhelming. The prongs hit her in the side, and the current surged through her muscles. Her back arched involuntarily, her limbs spasming. A cry tore from her throat as electricity seized her body and held it there. And then, as suddenly as it came, the current stopped. Her muscles went limp. Carlin dropped to his knees beside her and slammed her wrists behind her back, locking the cuffs in place with a force that made her wince. "Resisting arrest," he muttered, panting as he tightened the restraints. "Assault on an officer. Attempted flight." He leaned in close, lips near her ear. "No one's coming for you." And as the flashing lights from his cruiser spilled over the wreckage and into the forest beyond, Nia lay still, her face pressed into the dirt, pain coursing through every joint, every breath shallow. But deep beneath the ache, a thought still burned. "I'm not done." The cuffs bit deep into Nia's wrists as Carlin hauled her from the dirt. Every movement sent shock waves of pain radiating from her shoulder and across her ribcage. Her body protested with every breath, her muscles still twitching from the electric convulsion of the taser. Blood trickled steadily from the side of her head, matting her hair against her temple. The swelling in her face was worse now, one eye half-lidded from bruising. Her lower lip split down the middle. She could barely walk, but he didn't care. Carlin yanked her upright and half-dragged her toward his cruiser, muttering curses under his breath like he needed them to justify the brutality. His fingers clutched her arm tight enough to bruise again, forcing her weight forward. Nia stumbled twice, her right knee buckling under the impact from the crash, but he didn't slow. When she sagged, he shoved her harder, slamming her into the side of the cruiser like a warning. "You should have just shut your mouth," he snarled, pressing her face against the hot metal door. "All of this? You brought it on yourself." She didn't answer. She had no breath left to waste. The sound of distant sirens pierced the stillness, drawing closer through the trees. Lights began to strobe between the trunks. Blue, red, blue again, spilling over branches and smoke and dust like a second reckoning arriving late. Back up. Carlin stepped back and adjusted his stance. Suddenly, all posture and control. He reached into his chest pocket, tapped his radio. "Requesting paramedics," he said into it, his voice suddenly steady and clean, as if none of what happened had been born from rage. "Suspect crashed her vehicle during pursuit. Minor injuries. In custody. Now." The gall of the lie almost made Nia laugh. If her ribs weren't grinding against one another, she might have. Two more cruisers pulled into the clearing near the wreck, tires cutting into the soil, headlights flaring through the dust. Uniformed officers stepped out, hands already on holsters, scanning the scene. "Right here!" Carlin called out, waving toward them like a hero in a made-for-TV moment. They approached, eyes falling on Nia, slumped against the side of the cruiser. Blood smeared down her cheek and collar. Arms locked behind her in bruised and twisted angles. One officer, tall and thick-necked with a permanent scowl, gestured at her. She, the driver, resisted arrest. "Assaulted me," Carlin said, voice clipped, detached. "Had to subdue her with the taser after she totaled her vehicle." The second officer raised an eyebrow at the scene, lips pressing into a frown. "She'd do all that?" Carlin didn't blink, wouldn't listen. "Attacked me at the checkpoint earlier, fled the scene, endangered civilians with a high-speed chase. This one's dangerous." She knew what she was doing. The word dangerous hung in the air like a knife. They always used that word. The scowl-faced officer stepped closer, circling her like she was an animal they weren't sure had stopped biting. He bent slightly to peer at her face, then turned back to Carlin. "She needs medical. She'll get it when we get her processed," Carlin said flatly. "We've got protocol." Nia said nothing. She knew exactly what that meant. Medical meant waiting until booking. Booking meant sitting in a chair for hours, handcuffed, bleeding, while they filled out paperwork and called it justice. The officer shrugged. "You the arresting officer." "I am," He stepped aside. Carlin opened the rear door of the cruiser and grabbed her arm again. When she winced, he tightened his grip. "Get in." She tried to move on her own, tried to keep even a sliver of control. But her knee gave out again. Her body had taken too much. The crash, the taser, the fists. Her limbs simply refused. He shoved her. She hit the back seat hard, knees banging against the edge, shoulders collapsing against vinyl. The cuffs dug deeper. She bit back a cry as her body crumpled awkwardly, legs twisted beneath her, ribs catching fire. The door slammed shut. She lay in the back seat, breath ragged, vision swimming, the sour tang of blood in her throat. Her cheek pressed against the cool plastic divider. A tear rolled down the side of her face. Not from fear, from fury. Outside, the other officers milled around, surveying the wreck, collecting nothing. No photos, no questions, no curiosity. Just routine. Just nods and protocol. Carlin's voice rose above the others, loud, official, full of clipped answers. He was shaping the story already. She was just the suspect, not a victim, not a woman assaulted on the side of a highway. Just another name for the paperwork. The cruiser jolted as Carlin got in the front, shut his door, and started the engine. The other officers began clearing out behind them, one by one. He glanced at her once through the rearview mirror. Expression unreadable. "You should have kept driving," he muttered. "Could have saved us both the trouble." Nia didn't answer. She couldn't. Her body was a map of injuries now. Nothing fatal, but everything sharp, aching, raw. Her right wrist throbbed where the cuff had crushed the bone against the seat. Her ribs were likely cracked. The ringing in her ear hadn't stopped since the taser hit her spine. But her mind was still hers. She focused her breath, slow and shallow, and shifted her weight just enough to keep pressure off her side. Her fingers flexed slightly behind her back, testing the limits of the restraints. She let her eyes fall shut, just briefly, just long enough to think, because she wasn't done, not even close. The station loomed ahead like a bunker against the night, squat and concrete with bars on its basement windows and an American flag fluttering limp in the still air above the front door. It wasn't large, just 3 floors with a narrow sally port that swallowed incoming cruisers like a loading dock for broken bodies. No press, no oversight, just dim lights and routine. The cruiser pulled through the gate and parked beside the intake ramp. Nia lay in the back seat, wrists still cuffed, body curled awkwardly in pain, her cheek pressed against the cracked vinyl, her breath shallow, every inch of her radiating with bruised heat. Her vision swam as the cruiser rolled to a stop. The door opened. "Let's go," Carlin said, grabbing her by the arm. He didn't ease her out. He pulled, hard, and her legs scrambled for purchase on the concrete. When she staggered, he let her fall, face first into the metal lip of the garage floor. Gasps echoed behind him, but none of them reached to help. "You're pathetic," he muttered, hauling her upright again. He walked her through the intake doors, her head bowed slightly, blood trailing from her nose and lip. Her jacket was torn. Her clothes were dirty and damp from sweat and blood. One of her shoes had come half loose during the crash, and now hung by the heel. As they passed the front desk, 2 officers looked up from their takeout containers. One, a heavy-set man with a wispy mustache, snorted through his straw. "That her? The one who clocked Carlin?" The other grinned. "Looks like the suspect lost round 2. Carlin laughed. Too loud, too eager. "She gave me trouble, yeah," he said, shoving her forward toward the booking door. "Didn't want to be searched. Next thing I know, she's throwing fists. She's not much to look at now," the first one added, tilting his head as he took in the bruising along her cheek, and the blood still dried into her collar. "That face is gonna be in the report?" "Self-inflicted," Carlin said smoothly. "Ran from the scene. Wrecked her car. Lucky she's still breathing." Nia said nothing. She didn't react. She saved her breath, let the words pass over her like water over stone. She had nothing to give them. Not confusion, Not fury, just silence. The intake officer barely looked at her. Her photo was taken. Flash bright against swollen eyes and split lips. She didn't flinch. Her fingerprints were pressed onto cold glass, one finger at a time. Then the cuffs were removed, and her hands screamed in protest as the blood returned to her wrists. She didn't wince. "Name?" the intake clerk asked. She lifted her eyes just slightly. Blood crusted in the lashes. "You have it." Carlin leaned in. "You can either answer now, or we add obstruction to the list." "I want my phone call," she said. Voice hoarse, dry from blood and impact. The clerk hesitated. Carlin stepped in. "She can call after processing. Let her cool off first." "I want my call," she repeated, louder this time. The weight of command behind her words rising like a long dormant instinct. The air shifted slightly. The officers looked at each other, unsure. One of them, an older man near the wall with graying stubble and tired eyes, spoke up. "Let her call. It's her right." Carlin scoffed, but stepped back. They led her to the holding room, a bare cell with a bolted-down phone on the wall and a steel bench coated in years of rust and grime. She limped inside and sat slowly, every movement deliberate, controlled, hiding the scream beneath her ribs. They didn't leave her alone. Not completely. One officer stood just outside the bars, arms crossed, watching her with mild interest. But she didn't care. She only needed 30 seconds. She picked up the phone, pressed the dial pad with trembling fingers, and waited. One ring, two. Then the voice she'd been waiting for. "You've reached Calloway." She didn't blink, didn't hesitate. "Red window," she said quietly. The silence on the line shifted. A breath. Then, understood. She hung up. The officer at the door raised an eyebrow. "That it?" She didn't answer. In a nondescript building 4 states away, Reese Calloway stood behind a desk scattered with satellite prints and tactical files. The moment he heard the phrase, "Red window," he moved. There were no questions, no delay. He opened a drawer beneath the desk and withdrew a sealed folder marked "Burn Notice Override." His fingers moved fast, flipping through coordinates, state agency rosters, encrypted phone numbers. He pressed a button on a secure landline. "This is Calloway. I'm initiating Protocol Echo 7, Level 2 retrieval. Operative is down, compromised. Law enforcement entanglement, hostile. Civilian front, I need a team in Georgia within the hour." On the other end, the voice responded with crisp certainty. "Names? Target, Monroe, Nia. Status, bloodied, not broken. We don't leave her there." "Understood." Calloway hung up and pulled a black duffel from beneath the desk. Inside it, keys, satellite phones, flash drives, an old photograph of him and Nia in a city they never named. He zipped it shut and moved for the door. Back at the station, Nia leaned against the wall, eyes closed. Her body throbbed in protest. The pain hadn't lessened, but something beneath it had shifted. She'd placed her call. Now the clock had started ticking, and when Reese came knocking, no one in this building would be ready. The early morning hours crept into the station unnoticed, slow and unhurried, the kind of hour when fatigue dulled sharp instincts and silence settled like dust over tired minds. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above cracked tile and scuffed boots. In the holding corridor, everything felt still, until it didn't. The front door opened with no announcement. No sirens, no flashing lights. Just the low squeak of hinges and the sharp click of polished shoes against linoleum. 2 men in charcoal suits stepped through the lobby, their stride deliberate, purposeful. They didn't flash badges. They didn't raise voices. They moved like they belonged, and no one stopped them. At the front desk, Officer Randall sat slouched with a cup of gas station coffee in one hand and a smear of powdered donut on his lip. He glanced up lazily, until his eyes caught the credentials one of the men silently laid on the desk. A white envelope. No logo. No letterhead. Just a heavy paperweight presence. The taller man, eyes hidden behind narrow-framed glasses, leaned in. "We're here for the Monroe detainment." Randall blinked. She's..." She's still in holding. Arrested last night by Officer Carlin. Not anymore, the man said, sliding a second folder across the desk. That's a federal override. The other officer, shorter but broader, didn't speak. He stood a step behind, eyes scanning the hallway without moving his head. Every gesture was contained, calculated. The kind of men who made others uneasy without ever needing to explain why. Behind them, the glass door opened again. This time, it was Reese Calloway. No longer in the shadows of an ops center. No longer behind a phone. He wore a tailored navy overcoat, his graying hair neatly combed back, his steps clipped and silent. He didn't greet the desk sergeant. He didn't need to. His eyes swept the lobby once, cataloging everything with the detachment of someone trained to see what others missed. He looked at the man behind the desk. "Get me to her," Reese said simply. Randall hesitated, blinking at the authority he couldn't name but instinctively obeyed. He reached for the buzzer and nodded. "Holdings this way." Down the hallway, past the humming vending machine and the peeling paint of forgotten corners, Nia sat on the bench inside the cell, her head resting lightly against the wall. Her eyes were closed, not from sleep, but from endurance. Her body had gone from pain to numbness, and her thoughts had slowed just enough to make room for silence. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Clean shoes, measured pace, no radio static. Then, the key in the lock. Her eyes opened. Reese stepped into view, the door swinging wide behind him. His face was unreadable, his mouth drawn tight, but his eyes held weight. He looked her over once. The bruises, the cuts, the swelling. His jaw flexed. "I came," he said quietly. She nodded. "Took you long enough?" His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "You good to walk?" "Barely," she admitted. "Good thing you won't need to." 2 more agents stepped into the room, flanking her without words. One gently lifted her by the arm, careful not to touch her wrist. The other placed a coat around her shoulders, masking the blood-streaked shirt and torn fabric. No cuffs, no chains, just quiet removal. Carlin stormed into the hallway as they exited holding, his boots heavy on the tile. His shirt was wrinkled, his knuckles scraped, and his voice rang out before he reached them. "What the hell is this?" Reese turned slowly. "Officer Carlin," he said calmly. "You can't just walk in here and—" "I can," Reese cut him off. "And I have." Carlin's jaw clenched. "She assaulted me. She ran from the scene. You don't get to erase that." Reese took a step forward. Not aggressive, not hostile. "Just enough. You don't know who she is," he said softly. "She's a civilian," Carlin snapped. "She was," Reese replied. "Now she's a file you'll never get to read." Carlin's eyes flicked to the 2 men behind Nia, then back to Reese. "You think you can scare me with suits?" "No," Reese said. "But I think the names in this folder will." He held up a sealed file. Nothing flashy. No titles. Just paper and silence. "Federal override," Reese continued. "Filed under Directive 42B. We've reviewed the footage from your cruiser. We've collected reports. We've compiled evidence." "There is no footage," Carlin said quickly. Reese smiled. "Just a little. That's what you told your chief. But your cruiser uploads every 6 hours. It hit the cloud before you could delete it." Carlin took a step back. "You should go home, officer," Reese said. "Take a few days. Breathe." Carlin didn't move, but something in his face had changed. The confidence had cracked, not because of the words, but because deep down, he understood. This wasn't the kind of storm you saw coming. This was the kind that had already arrived. Nia passed him without a glance, her steps slow, body stiff, each motion carefully measured to minimize pain. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence cut deeper than anything she could have said. Reese walked beside her as they left the station. The other agents flanked them, silent as shadows. Outside, the morning light broke gently over the city. Soft gold across the pavement. The cold air burned against her swollen skin, but she welcomed it. They didn't use the front entrance. They exited through the side. Unmarked vehicle, engine running, door already open. She climbed in slowly, every bruise reminding her of what had happened. but her eyes stayed forward, focused. Inside the car, Reese handed her a clean bottle of water. "You're safe now," he said. She unscrewed the cap and drank slowly, then looked out the window as the station faded behind them. "No," she said, "I'm not safe." She turned to him. "But I'm ready." The safe house was tucked into the outskirts of a quiet neighborhood just outside Atlanta, obscured behind layers of old growth and a long gravel driveway that didn't show up on maps. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a tired cabin. Wood paneling, storm shutters, and a rusted mailbox leaning at a crooked angle. But inside, it was precision. Soundproofed walls, reinforced doors, satellite uplink. Not flashy, not comfortable, just secure. Nia stood barefoot near the kitchen sink, steam from a ceramic mug curling upward as her fingers tightened around it. She wore sweatpants and a loose hoodie that hung from her frame. Her left arm was wrapped tight against her ribs, supported in a sling. Her cheekbone had turned a deep purple, the skin stretched and swollen beneath a healing cut. Her lip had mended, but the line remained. A reminder. She stared out the window into the trees. Reese sat at the small table behind her, sleeves rolled up, fingers flipping through a thin stack of manila folders. A laptop buzzed quietly beside him. Green lines crawling across the screen, tracing secure packets of data, tunneling through encryption. "You're quiet," he said. Nia didn't turn. "You told me once that silence is a weapon." "Not always. It is when they expect you to scream." Reese leaned back, studying her. The morning light filtered through the blinds, cutting across his face in measured bands. He looked older now than he had on the tarmac 3 years ago. Older even than when he showed up at that station last night. His eyes held it. The fatigue, the weight, but they were sharp. "You're stable for now," he said. "No APB. No charges on the books." Nia finally turned, resting the mug on the counter. "And Carlin? He filed a report. Said you ambushed him at a checkpoint. Said you resisted. Same story he's probably told a dozen times." She tilted her head. "The cruiser footage, being handled. Quietly. It's in a vault now where no one in that precinct can get to it. But that doesn't mean it'll stay quiet forever." Nia stepped closer, wincing slightly. "What does Langley say?" Reese's face hardened. "They're not saying anything. Officially, you're still out." She nodded, expecting it but still tasting the bitterness of abandonment. "So I'm on my own." "Not entirely." He pushed a folder toward her. "I can't get them to publicly endorse anything. No statements, no funding, no diplomatic shield, but I can give you this. And I can keep things out of the press, for now." She opened the folder. Inside, records, addresses, transfer memos. A web of names and numbers that connected dots she hadn't seen in years. Civilian rosters, law enforcement logs, internal complaints, disciplinary reviews that never reached disciplinary action. "Carlin," she murmured, flipping through the pages. "He's been doing this for years." Reese nodded. "Always one report away from suspension. Always one witness short. His file's been padded by half the state's internal protection network. The union eats complaints before they leave the inbox." She paused at a memo near the back. "A handwritten letter from a woman in South Georgia, claims of unlawful search, bruises on her arms, missing property." No follow-up. "How far does this go?" she asked. Reese looked at her. "Far enough that you'll make enemies. Not just in the precinct. The chief's office is tied to him. City council knows his name. Some of the judges, too. If you pull the thread, the whole patchwork starts to fray." Nia lowered the folder. "That's what I'm counting on." Reese sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're not in the field anymore, Nia. You're not protected by diplomatic immunity or federal status. If you get caught leaning on someone too hard, they'll bury you the same way they tried to bury you in that cruiser." "I'm not leaning," she said. "I'm pulling." Quietly, he gave her a look. Half frustration, half reluctant admiration. "That's what I was afraid of." She smiled, just barely. "You always said I was too stubborn to stay retired." Reese stood and walked over to a metal briefcase resting against the wall. He keyed in a code and opened it, revealing a tablet, a hard drive, and 2 burner phones. He placed them on the counter. Encrypted drive has everything we could pull without triggering red flags. Badge rosters, known associates, financials. One of the phone's routes through my private uplink. The other is clean. Use it once, then kill it. Nia picked up the tablet. Her fingers moved slow, still stiff from swelling, but the muscle memory returned immediately. She tapped through the interface, her eyes narrowing at the names. Some of these cops, same ones on Carlin's shift, same precinct, same night rotation. At least 3 have identical complaint patterns. One of them's his old academy roommate. Another's married to a records clerk. That's how they've kept reports from going anywhere. She tapped again, bringing up the station's org chart. And the chief? Reese nodded. Dana Coe, former patrol, promoted up the ladder fast. Took over internal affairs for 2 years, then straight to chief. She's the reason none of the early cases ever reached the DA. Nia's jaw flexed. She's protecting him. She's protecting the machine. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nia closed the tablet and looked up. Her voice was calm, but firm. I'm going to expose them. Reese gave a small nod, resigned. I know. And when I do, she added, I don't want it to be quiet. The library near the courthouse wasn't where most revolutions began, but it served Nia just fine. Its fluorescent lights buzzed low above cracked laminate floors and rows of public computers, half of them blinking with error messages. The building smelled of mildew and old coffee, but it had what she needed. Quiet access, free records terminals, and no one asking questions. She sat tucked in the corner, hoodie pulled low over her brow, bruises mostly hidden beneath makeup that only half covered the damage. Her fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, the ache in her wrist dulling with each stroke. Her ribs still screamed when she shifted too quickly. But she'd learned to move carefully, patiently. The body could be managed. It was the data she needed now. On the screen in front of her, a chain of incident reports spanning 6 years. Different names, different faces, but patterns always left shadows. Officer Brett Carlin appeared in more reports than most. Unlawful search, excessive force, suspect injuries labeled as accidental. Names like resisted and non-compliant were repeated like chants. But what caught her attention were the silences, the cases that vanished halfway through the paper trail. Complaints filed, but not logged. Testimonies never followed up. Internal reviews that began and then disappeared. At first, the missing links looked like bureaucratic error. But Nia knew better. This wasn't carelessness. This was control. Suppression from inside the system. Every missing page led her toward a single name, Chief Dana Coe. The timeline was subtle. She rose through the department quickly. IA for 2 years, then assistant chief, then head of the department. She was hailed in the papers as the reformer. But in her wake, complaint resolution rates plummeted. Oversight board access was curtailed. Internal affairs cases were rerouted through special protocols. Nia sat back, her breath shallow as she stared at Coe's official portrait. Clean, sharp, controlled, the image of law and order. But behind her eyes, Nia saw it now, the pattern of someone who didn't stop the corruption, but shaped it, smoothed it, sanitized it, just enough for headlines to swallow it whole. She leaned forward again, pulling up archived court records. 3 lawsuits filed by civilians against the department in the past 5 years, all dropped, all sealed under mediation clauses. One plaintiff had died 3 months later, hit by a car. No foul play, no evidence, just a closed door in the middle of a storm. She copied the file to the encrypted drive, unplugged it, and slipped it into her pocket. Then she moved. The precinct buzzed with the noise of a department too busy to notice what moved beneath its own floorboards. Phones rang. Radios crackled. Uniforms passed one another with coffee cups and half-written citations. On the second floor, Tucked between narcotics and traffic enforcement, sat the last office without a nameplate. Nia stood outside it, eyes scanning the frosted glass door. Internal affairs. Restricted access. She knocked once. The woman who opened the door looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her curls were pulled back into a tight bun, strands falling loose around her temple. A half-empty coffee cup trembled in her hand. Her eyes, sharp and exhausted, settled on Nia with a flash of recognition. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. "I know," Nia replied, "but I think you're tired of waiting for someone to be." Detective Layla Grant narrowed her gaze. "How do you know my name?" "I've been pulling threads," Nia said, "and I found yours woven between the ones trying not to unravel." Layla stepped aside, letting her in. The office was cramped, the walls lined with shelves stacked haphazardly with boxes and binders. A corkboard near the window held printed emails, scribbled notes, and photos of officers mid-incident. Most had red X's drawn through them. A few still had question marks. Layla shut the door behind them. "You have 5 minutes before someone upstairs starts wondering why I'm talking to a civilian." Nia stepped closer, sliding the encrypted drive onto the desk. "Carlin's protected," she said. "But he's not alone. Co's shielding more than just him. She's been diverting complaints for years, routing them through her old channels in IA, then burying them. You've seen the reports disappear. I'm guessing you tried to follow up." Layla crossed her arms. 3 years ago, I filed a formal report on Carlin, took it to the oversight board. The next day, my office was moved from the main floor to here. My review status changed to probationary. "They cut my team in half. They silenced you," Nia said. "They reminded me who signs the checks." For a moment, the two women just stood there, the weight of the machine pressing down on them from every floor above. "I've got copies of the cruiser footage," Nia said quietly. "Backed up. Secure. I've got sworn statements from civilians who had similar encounters. I've got patterns, and I've got you." Layla hesitated. Her fingers drummed once against the file cabinet behind her. "You know, if we move on this, we don't get to stop halfway," she said. "I'm not here to stop," Nia replied. "I'm here to finish." Layla exhaled, long and slow. Then she pulled open a drawer and removed a battered flash drive. 2 years' worth of internal logs. Most of it's buried so deep I had to pull the metadata by hand. I've been sitting on it, waiting for someone with nothing to lose. Nia accepted the drive. "We're not going to the press," Layla said. "Not yet. We go legal, quiet, controlled. We find the right judge, the right leak. One thread at a time." Nia nodded. "We do this," she said. "And it won't just be Carlin who goes down. It'll be everyone he hid behind." For the first time, Layla smiled. "Good." The footage was exactly 36 seconds long. It began with a wide shot from the dashcam of Carlin's cruiser. The camera tilted just enough to show Nia standing beside her vehicle at the checkpoint. The audio was faint, muffled by distance and static, but the voices still carried. "Step out of the vehicle!" Carlin barked. There was no siren, no emergency, just a woman complying. The next frame showed Carlin rifling through her personal belongings without consent. Then her protest. Then the moment of escalation. His posture shifted. He stepped forward, and before she could finish speaking, his fist collided with her face. The camera caught it clearly. The sound, the awful crack of bone and impact, was undeniable. Then, the brief scuffle. The blur of movement. The chase, the clip cut to black. That was the version Nia released. Redacted. Edited just enough to protect her next move, but raw enough to strike a nerve. It appeared on a single burner account, posted on a locked page with no comments, no hashtags, only a title. Routine check stop. Georgia, February 3rd. Within 3 hours, it had been downloaded, reshared, and reposted thousands of times. By hour 6, it was trending on multiple platforms. By nightfall, it had caught fire. News outlets scrambled for verification. Anonymous users flooded timelines with outraged commentary. Hashtags exploded across the web. Sergeant Justice for Nia? Who protects us? Carlin exposed. Commentators speculated. Activists mobilized. Legal experts dissected the footage frame by frame, their outrage fueling broadcasts. The brutality was impossible to ignore. And it wasn't abstract. It had a name, a face. And this time, the victim had fought back. By morning, the department released a statement. It was thin, a 3-paragraph boilerplate from the press liaison's office that said little and avoided more. The department is aware of circulating footage regarding an encounter involving Officer Brett Carlin. An internal review is currently underway. We ask for the public's patience while we conduct a thorough investigation. No mention of Nia, no mention of injuries, just a vague appeal for calm, issued in the same tone used for traffic reroutes and noise complaints. Inside the safe house, Nia sat cross-legged on the floor beside the coffee table, her ribs still wrapped, a heating pad draped across her shoulder. Reese stood near the window, one ear pressed to his phone, watching the feed scroll silently across the muted TV. "She's not backing down," he said, as he hung up. Coe's under pressure. "Counsel wants her to respond. They won't fire her," Nia said. "Not yet." "No, but they've started whispering," Reese replied, "and she's started listening." Nia looked over at the laptop. Dozens of tabs open, comment threads, breaking headlines, early legal analyses. "She hasn't denied anything," Nia said. "She's watching to see which way the wind's blowing." Reese crossed his arms. "Then let's give her a gust." Later that night, a second video surfaced. It came from an anonymous internal leak, shared with a known watchdog journalist in the city. This one showed Officer Carlin during an arrest 2 years prior. Body cam footage that had never made it to trial. The suspect was unarmed, face pressed into the pavement, screaming as Carlin pressed his knee into the back of his neck. The audio cut out halfway through, but the timestamp and badge overlay remained. The journalist included a single line, obtained from an unnamed IA officer still working inside the department. It was Layla's message. The story hit harder than the first. Now it wasn't just a brutal encounter, it was a pattern, a history, and someone inside was confirming it. Within hours, the city's Human Rights Council issued a demand for immediate review of Carlin's record. A civil rights attorney from Atlanta filed a class action motion to unseal complaints previously closed by Coe's office. The mayor's office went quiet. And Chief Dana Coe? She blinked first. She held a short press conference the following afternoon, flanked by department attorneys and a red-eyed communications aide. Her statement was rehearsed, carefully crafted. "We take these allegations seriously. Officer Carlin has been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. Our department does not tolerate misconduct, and we remain committed to transparency and justice." It wasn't an admission, but it was a crack. To the trained eye, it was more than that. It was distance. Coe had started separating herself from Carlin, slowly pulling away like someone realizing their lifeboat had a hole in it. Nia watched it all unfold from the safe house, one arm still in a sling, her voice quiet but resolute. "She's calculating," she said to Reese. "She's trying to bleed out the outrage before it touches her." Reese nodded, his eyes fixed on the screen. "But you cut deeper than she expected." "She's not loyal to him," Nia said. "She's loyal to survival. If we make Carlin toxic enough, she'll feed him to the fire before she lets it touch her shoes." Reese looked at her carefully. "You're not stopping at Carlin." "No," she said. "He's just the door." Coe built the hallway. In the dark corners of the precinct, Brett Carlin was unraveling. He sat alone in the locker room, fists clenched on either side of a printout of the department's latest memo. Leave of absence. Review pending. No phone calls, no badge access, no weapon. His world, the one he thought was built to protect him, was crumbling, and at the center of it was a woman he'd thought would vanish into a jail cell. Instead, she was turning the city against him. He slammed his fist into the locker, rattling the metal, breath heavy, thoughts spinning. And for the first time, real fear crept into his chest. not fear of exposure. Fear of what she would do next. The station lobby was different now. Gone was the lazy shuffle of officers sipping coffee and watching sports highlights, the idle jokes, the casual arrogance. That silence had been replaced by a buzz, tense, low, and constant. Phones rang more often. Eyes darted toward doors, and every passing moment felt like the calm before a quake. Nia stepped through the front doors of the precinct with Layla just behind her, the air thick with glances and murmured recognition. She was dressed plainly, black slacks, a charcoal coat, no makeup to hide the fading bruise on her jaw or the scab on her cheekbone. She didn't need to hide. Not anymore. She walked with purpose, not speed, not aggression, but with weight in every step. Carlin was already inside, pacing like a caged animal outside the briefing room, a file clutched in one hand, his knuckles white from gripping too tightly. His uniform was rumpled, and his badge, suspended or not, was clipped defiantly to his chest. When he saw her, he froze. The air between them charged instantly, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Nia didn't flinch. She approached him with measured calm, stopping just short of his reach. Layla positioned herself beside her, chin high, a small flash drive in hand. Carlin sneered, lips curling. "You've got some nerve walking in here," he growled. "And you've got some explaining to do," she replied. "Lucky for you. We're recording this time." His eyes flicked toward the small crowd forming behind the desk, officers watching, some trying to look away, others leaning forward like a show had just begun. Nia opened a folder she carried and held up a printed timeline of complaints. Dates, names, badge numbers. Your pattern's not subtle. You were protected for years because people like Chief Ko kept you just far enough beneath the headlines. But you left a trail. Carlin laughed bitterly. You think a stack of papers changes anything? You think they care about your little charts? Layla stepped forward, voice firm. They'll care about the Federal Review team sitting 2 blocks from here, watching everything that happens in this building today. They'll care about the class action motion that's being filed with the Superior Court. They'll care about the City Council's vote next week to audit the entire department's Internal Affairs Division. He looked at her, chest rising. You're bluffing. We're not, Nia said softly, and neither is the camera above your head. Carlin's gaze shot upward. In the corner, near the ceiling, a blinking red light confirmed what he already feared. The press hadn't been allowed inside, but the oversight observers had been, and they'd brought their own cameras. From inside the conference room, someone opened the door. Chief Dana Ko stepped into view, flanked by 2 city legal advisors and a pair of uniformed officers with rigid posture. Her expression was unreadable, sculpted with precision, but Nia caught it. The first flicker of calculation behind her eyes as she saw the standoff unfolding. Ms. Monroe. Detective Grant, Ko said coolly. We've prepared a private conference room. No need for privacy, Layla interrupted. The record belongs to the people now. Ko hesitated. Just enough. She nodded once. Then, let's proceed. They began moving toward the conference room. The door held open, but Carlin didn't follow. Instead, he turned back to Nia, blocking her path. You think you're going to win, he muttered. But you don't belong here. You're nothing but a fake. Say it, Nia said, her voice low, unmoved. Say what you've wanted to say since the day you pulled me over. His face twisted, the mask slipping all at once. You people never learn, he spat. You think you're owed something. You think you can walk in here, parade your sob story, turn everyone into your little soldiers. Cameras clicked behind the glass wall. One of the oversight agents lifted a phone. A red light blinked. Keep going, Layla said. Let them see you. Carlin's voice rose. She attacked me. She fought me. She made it a war. You made it one, Nia replied, eyes never leaving his. And now everyone sees it for what it is. He stepped closer, his face blotchy with fury. You think I'm afraid of you? You think I'll just roll over because of a camera? Ko's voice cracked from behind him. Officer Carlin, that's enough. But he didn't stop. She's a disgrace, he bellowed, turning now, voice echoing through the lobby. "You're all cowards for letting her twist this into some witch hunt. She broke the law. She broke your cycle," Layla said. His jaw clenched so tightly it shook. "You're done," Reese Calloway said, stepping from a side hallway, calm and measured. "And you know it." Carlin froze. His eyes flicked between them. Nia, Layla, Reese, the camera lights, Coe's stillness, the officers watching from every wall. He was surrounded, not by weapons, but by truth. And that was something he'd never been trained to survive. Coe turned. "Take him out of the building, now!" Two officers moved, hesitating only slightly before grabbing Carlin by the arms. He resisted, his curses echoing down the hallway as he fought the inevitable. "You're gonna regret this," Carlin shouted, his voice ragged with desperation. "All of you!" But the threat, once enough to rattle rooms and silence questions, now rang hollow. The force behind it had cracked. His voice, once commanding, now trembled beneath the weight of his own unraveling. He wasn't a man giving orders anymore. He was a man drowning, flailing against a tide he never expected to face, choking on the truth he'd tried so long to bury. The authority he once wore like armor had crumbled in full view of the cameras, the press, and his own department. Inside the conference room, the heavy door eased shut behind Nia with a soft but final thud. She moved calmly to the table, each step deliberate, each breath controlled. Across from her sat Chief Dana Coe, no longer cloaked in power or command, but exposed, cornered by the very system she had manipulated. Nia took her seat, not as a suspect, not as a casualty of departmental abuse, but as something far greater. She was a reckoning, a storm of truth that no spin or protocol could contain. The silence that settled between them wasn't tense or uncertain. It wasn't awkward. It was earned. The kind of silence that comes when justice is no longer a question, but a presence in the room. By the end of the week, the city's public records office was overwhelmed by the flood of requests pouring in from citizens and media alike. People wanted answers, clarity, and accountability. And this time, they refused to be ignored. Files long buried or hidden in dusty archives now surfaced for scrutiny. Every document related to Officer Brett Carlin, once quietly protected, was exposed to the harsh light of public judgment. Internal affairs had transformed overnight from a forgotten backwater into the busiest section of the precinct. Detective Layla Grant led the charge, quietly gathering and organizing the testimonies of those who had been silenced for too long. Her days were filled with meetings behind closed doors and carefully compiled evidence that could no longer be brushed aside. Carlin's record alone contained multiple incidents, each more troubling than the last. Unprovoked assaults, unlawful searches, threats against civilians, and internal cover-ups. The pressure mounted quickly. First came the official suspension, quietly announced but loudly received. Then, just a day later, came Carlin's arrest. He was charged formally on 3 felony counts: assault under color of law, abuse of authority, and tampering with digital evidence. 2 misdemeanors, obstruction of justice and excessive force, were also added. Carlin's expression when they cuffed him was one of stunned disbelief. He looked around for allies, but none stepped forward. Those who had once shielded him now avoided his gaze, unwilling to fall alongside him. The precinct hallways, previously filled with a quiet arrogance, became silent and tense. Officers exchanged wary glances, aware that the ground beneath their feet had shifted. Chief Dana Coe, who had once confidently steered the narrative, now struggled to contain the rapidly unfolding crisis. Her carefully managed public image was crumbling with each revelation. Emails and memos leaked to the press, exposing the extent of her involvement. Former allies distanced themselves, leaving her increasingly isolated. Nia refused to watch from the sidelines. Her injuries had slowly begun to heal, but the reminders were still there. The ache in her ribs, the fading bruises, the stiffness in her wrist. Yet she carried herself with renewed purpose, no longer hesitant or uncertain. She had chosen her battle and knew exactly what she was fighting for. The disciplinary hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in a municipal courtroom filled to capacity. Rows of wooden benches were occupied by journalists, activists, and community members eager for answers. Cameras lined the walls, broadcasting the proceedings to thousands who had followed the case closely. Nia took her seat at the witness table, calmly meeting the gaze of the disciplinary panel in front of her. Detective Grant sat behind her, ready with meticulously organized evidence. The room quieted as Nia began to speak, her voice clear and steady. "I was stopped that evening without cause," she began, looking directly at the panelists. "Officer Carlin had no reason to search my car, no reason to become aggressive, and certainly no justification for assaulting me. But what concerns me most isn't just what he did. It's that he was allowed to do it repeatedly, without consequence." She paused, letting her words settle, then continued, "Chief Coe received multiple complaints and warnings about Officer Carlin's behavior. Each of those complaints was deliberately ignored or buried. This was not an oversight. It was a choice, one that put innocent people at risk every day." A panel member leaned forward slightly, adjusting his glasses. "Ms. Monroe, can you confirm that you have seen documentation directly linking Chief Coe to these cover-ups?" "Yes," Nia responded without hesitation. "Detective Grant has compiled extensive evidence. Chief Coe personally redirected internal investigations, buried official complaints, and allowed Carlin and officers like him to continue abusing their power." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Journalists scribbled furiously in their notepads, and camera shutters clicked rapidly. Chief Coe sat at a separate table, flanked by her attorneys, her carefully controlled expression faltering under scrutiny. Nia glanced briefly in her direction, making it clear that her testimony was not personal. It was about justice. "I came here today because silence allows people like Carlin and Coe to thrive," Nia continued. "I came to ensure no one else has to endure what I did, and that no one else is silenced when they try to speak up." When Nia finished her statement, the room erupted in supportive murmurs and quiet applause. Even the stern faces on the disciplinary panel softened slightly, understanding the gravity of what had been presented. Less than a day later, the pressure became too great. Chief Dana Coe resigned without fanfare, issuing a brief statement that offered no apology or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Her departure marked a clear turning point. The powerful had become vulnerable, and accountability was finally within reach. Internal affairs moved swiftly. 6 additional officers closely linked to Carlin faced suspension and immediate investigations. One, eager to protect himself, volunteered to testify against his fellow officers in exchange for leniency. The union's attempts at intervention fell short, their defenses collapsing under overwhelming evidence and public outrage. Back at the safe house, Nia stood quietly on the porch as evening settled softly around her. She watched as Reese Calloway approached, carrying another folder in his hand. "The state prosecutor confirmed it today," Reese said as he stopped beside her. "Your testimony sealed Carlin's fate. No more hearings, just trial preparation now. Coe is gone, Carlin's finished, and the others are falling one by one." Nia nodded slowly, her gaze fixed thoughtfully on the shadows stretching across the yard. "But it's not over yet," she said softly. Reese studied her carefully, recognizing the determination still burning quietly within her. "You've done more than enough. Carlin and Coe were the heart of the problem." Nia turned to face him directly, her expression calm but resolute. "They were symptoms, Reese. This department let men like Carlin thrive. We need to change more than just the faces at the top. We have to tear down what allowed them to rise in the first place." He smiled faintly, recognizing the resolve in her eyes. "Then we keep fighting." She took the folder he handed her, gripping it firmly. "We keep going," she agreed quietly, "until we don't have to anymore." Together they stood, side by side, watching darkness fall. The fight wasn't finished, But the hardest battles had already been won, and now, finally, real change felt possible. A cold, steady rain fell gently from a low gray sky, washing away the last remnants of dirt and grime from the streets outside the courthouse. Nia stood beneath the wide stone archway near the main entrance, partially shielded from the drizzle, her coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She watched intently, silently, as the heavy courthouse doors swung open. A wave of reporters surged forward, microphones and cameras ready, capturing every moment of the spectacle unfolding in front of them. Two uniformed officers stepped out first, their expressions grim and focused, followed closely by a familiar figure in shackles. Brett Carlin, his hands cuffed at his waist, chains linking down to his ankles, shuffled awkwardly toward the waiting police van. He kept his eyes downcast, refusing to acknowledge the shouted questions and flashes of the cameras around him. Gone was the defiant posture, the arrogance, the sneer that had once dominated every space he entered. In their place was only anger, raw, humiliated fury, simmering behind tightly pressed lips. Carlin raised his head briefly as an officer opened the van door, and for a fleeting second, his eyes found Nia's. The intensity of his hatred was palpable, burning with a bitterness that no longer carried weight or power. She met his stare evenly, refusing to blink or look away. This wasn't about gloating. It was about closure, about showing him that he no longer held power over her or anyone else. His expression twisted slightly, then faltered. In that brief moment, she saw recognition of defeat. He climbed inside the vehicle, head bowed again, shoulders sagging. The door slammed shut behind him with a resonating finality, and Nia allowed herself a slow, steady exhale. The van pulled away, lights flashing, heading toward confinement, isolation, and accountability. Carlin's reign was over. As the crowd of reporters dispersed, their attention shifting to other stories, Detective Layla Grant stepped quietly up beside Nia, tucking her hands into her pockets. They stood in silence for a few moments, absorbing what they'd witnessed. "It's already spreading," Layla said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "Calls have been coming in from precincts across the state. Officers who've felt silenced for years are reaching out. People are speaking up again, Nia." Nia nodded, watching the van disappear around the corner. "Good. That's exactly what we wanted." Layla turned slightly toward her, concern touching her expression. "That's exactly what we wanted." Layla turned slightly toward her, concern touching her expression. "But you know it won't end here. This case opened doors. It showed people what's possible. They're asking questions we couldn't ask before." "Then let them keep asking," Nia said softly. "We opened the door. Now it belongs to everyone else." They stood quietly again, listening to the gentle rhythm of the rain against the pavement. After a moment, Layla smiled faintly, touching Nia's arm gently. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Nia smiled back, warmth in her eyes. "We did this together, Layla. None of it would have happened without you." Layla nodded and stepped away slowly, heading back into the courthouse to continue what they had started. Nia watched her go, grateful for the ally she'd found in a place she'd once thought incapable of change. As Nia prepared to leave, another figure appeared at her side. Reese Calloway moved silently up the courthouse steps, hands in the pockets of his long overcoat, his silver hair flecked lightly by the drizzle. He stood beside her quietly for a moment, taking in the sight of the courthouse, the rain, and the peaceful street, now cleared of reporters and cameras. "This isn't just about Carlin anymore," Reese finally said. "It's about the kind of justice that changes entire systems. People have noticed you, Nia. They're listening." She turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "What are you offering?" Reese looked at her thoughtfully. "Come back. Join the oversight team officially. Help us fix it from the inside. You've proven you can make real change happen." Nia considered his words carefully, feeling the weight of everything they implied. After a moment, she gently shook her head. "I appreciate it, Reese. I really do. But the inside is exactly where these problems started. I think I can do more from outside, where no one controls the questions I ask or the answers I uncover?" Reese regarded her for a moment, then smiled warmly. "I expected you'd say that, but the offer stays open whenever you're ready." She reached out, gently touching his arm. "You saved me once," she said quietly. "When everyone else looked away, you believed me. I'll never forget that." "You saved yourself, Nia," he responded firmly. "You always did. I just reminded them who you were." She smiled again, briefly, before stepping away from the courthouse steps into the soft rain. As she walked down the street, Nia breathed deeply, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Her injuries were healing, her steps steadier, her resolve clearer than ever before. This wasn't just about confronting Carlin or Chief Ko, it was about giving a voice back to people like her, to those who'd been silenced, to those who hadn't yet found the courage or strength to fight back. This was only the beginning. She walked through the drizzle, her mind already planning what would come next. The groups she'd help organize, the whistleblowers she'd support, the stories she'd make sure were heard. Because real justice didn't come from a courtroom or a single case. It came from ordinary people willing to demand change, to refuse silence, to insist on accountability no matter the cost. And Nia intended to be there, every step of the way, helping others find the strength she'd fought so hard to reclaim. She didn't look back as the courthouse faded into the mist behind her. The past was done. What mattered now was the future she had chosen. A future defined not by the cruelty she'd faced, but by the courage she had discovered in herself. For the first time since this journey began, Nia Monroe felt truly free. Nia's car eased slowly to a stop alongside the quiet stretch of highway where everything had started. The sun hung low in the sky, bathing the road and surrounding trees in a soft golden glow. It was peaceful now. No flashing lights, no angry voices, no violence echoing through the evening air, just a quiet stretch of pavement, cutting through a dense wall of trees. She stepped out slowly, shutting the door gently behind her, and walked onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched softly beneath her feet, each step steady and deliberate. The injuries that had once made every movement painful were gone. The bruises had faded, her wrist had healed, and her ribs no longer protested when she breathed deeply. But the memories remained, as vivid and intense as they had been the night Officer Carlin's fist connected with her face. Nia stood quietly at the edge of the road, hands resting in her jacket pockets, looking out at the empty highway as though she could still see everything unfolding before her. The blue and red lights of Carlin's cruiser flashing angrily in the darkness, his voice harsh and authoritative. Her own attempts to remain calm, even as her instincts warned her that something was terribly wrong. She could still hear the quiet hum of her car's engine, the rustle of leaves disturbed by passing traffic, and finally, the sharp crack of violence that had broken the quiet forever. She let her eyes close briefly, allowing the memories to come, to wash over her one last time, not with fear, but with a newfound strength. She had chosen that night, perhaps without even fully realizing it, not to let silence be her answer. She had chosen not to accept injustice, not to be a victim who would quietly fade into obscurity. Her choice had set off a chain reaction she hadn't anticipated, a chain reaction that rippled outward, uncovering layers of corruption and complicity that had gone unchallenged for far too long. Now she understood clearly. That night had marked a turning point not just for her, but for others as well. Because she had refused silence, others were beginning to speak. Officers who'd once felt powerless were stepping forward. Citizens who'd once feared retaliation were finding their voices. Journalists were now asking difficult questions openly, unafraid of consequences. Change was happening. Not overnight, not easily, but steadily, undeniably, growing stronger with each passing day. Nia opened her eyes again, breathing deeply. She turned slightly, leaning against the hood of her car, feeling the cool metal press against her hip. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, and she pulled it out, checking the news alert flashing across the screen. A live video played silently, showing a well-known local news anchor standing outside City Hall, reporting on the rising wave of accountability sweeping through police departments statewide. She turned up the volume slightly, listening carefully as the anchor spoke. Pressure continues to mount on police departments across Georgia in the wake of revelations stemming from the Brett Carlin case. Multiple precincts have announced internal audits, and several senior officials have resigned or been suspended pending investigations. Many are calling this a moment of unprecedented accountability. Civil rights organizations say they won't let up, promising to ensure that the momentum for change doesn't fade. The anchor paused, glancing toward the crowd of protesters behind her, holding signs that read, "Justice Matters," and "No More Silence." As one activist put it earlier today, the anchor continued, "The Carlin case showed us all that silence only protects the powerful. It's time we speak out and demand better from those who serve." Nia smiled faintly, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle inside her chest. This was exactly what she'd hoped would come from that painful night. Real change, meaningful consequences, a powerful wave of voices demanding justice. She hadn't planned for any of this when Carlin first confronted her. She'd simply decided that she would not be broken, that she wouldn't silently disappear into the shadows. And now, she wasn't alone. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and looked out at the quiet highway one last time. The bruises had healed, but the scars would always remind her why the fight mattered. It wasn't just about Carlin or Chief Coe or the precinct. It was about everyone who'd been made to feel powerless and voiceless. It was about giving them back the strength they'd lost, just as she'd reclaimed her own. She climbed back into her car, gently pulling the door closed, and started the engine. The familiar hum was comforting, grounding her once again in the present. She glanced one last time at the empty stretch of road, where she'd faced the violence and cruelty she had never imagined would be part of her story. And yet, standing on the other side of it now, she understood how it had shaped her into someone stronger and more determined. She eased the car forward, tires rolling softly over gravel and onto smooth pavement. As the trees blurred past her windows, she felt not bitterness, but clarity. The road ahead wasn't about surviving. It was about helping others do the same. Her story had inspired action. Now, it was her turn to inspire others. She drove away from that quiet stretch of highway with a newfound purpose. No longer the woman Officer Carlin had tried to silence, no longer the victim society might have expected her to be, but something stronger, a force for justice, for change, and for hope. The sun dipped below the horizon, and twilight settled over the road, gentle and calm. But inside her chest, Nia felt a spark that had been absent for too long. It was time now to move forward, toward the future she'd helped create. A future defined by voices speaking loudly, truthfully, unafraid. She pressed down on the accelerator, letting the road carry her onward. Behind her lay the quiet place, where silence had been broken forever. Ahead lay the promise of justice, not just for her, but for everyone who had been waiting patiently for someone brave enough to say, "No more." And for the first time since it all began, Nia Monroe knew exactly who she was and who she intended to become. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.